Hello there, you're watching the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what's making the headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. A shortened paper review because of our extended news at 10, but you will be with us till midnight, so good to see you both. So let's take a look then at what's making the front pages, and most of the papers are leading on the attack on a maternity hospital in Mariupol. Putin bombs children's hospital is the headline for The Eye. The Metro describes it as a new low for Putin, with a picture of some of those injured. The Mirror says simply barbaric, while the Mail calls it depraved and says Boris Johnson has vowed to hold President Putin to account. President Zelensky says Russia has committed an atrocity and that there are children buried under the rubble. That makes the front of the FT. The Daily Telegraph reports that there are concerns in the West that Putin is planning a chemical attack. And the Yorkshire Post says Boris Johnson is resisting calls from within his own party to relax visa requirements for Ukrainian refugees. And just a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. So let's bring in Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire then. And some shocking front pages after some shocking news, Kevin. Let's start with your paper, the Daily Mirror. The headline there, barbaric, with this horrendous airstrike on a hospital, perhaps some of the more shocking scenes in a fortnight of horrors.
Yeah, and just when you think you can't be shocked anymore, you are. And this is the hospital in Mariupol, the maternity hospital, children's hospital, utterly devastated. And that picture widely seen now of a very heavily pregnant woman, possibly just about to be give birth, being carried out because it's been wrecked and barbaric. Who could disagree that it is barbaric, whether it was intentionally targeted, bombed or not? If you're dropping bombs on the port city of Mariupol, 460,000 people in it, they're trapped. It's got to be a war crime because you're going to just be killing innocent civilians. You can't use the old excuses Putin's apologists will, that it's military targets. It's not. It's terrorizing a civilian population and trying to beat them into submission, so they will surrender. But the Ukrainians are showing remarkable, inspiring defiance and resilience. But there, you see the picture there, that woman hugging that child. It is a young soldier. It doesn't really look old enough to be wearing a uniform, bandaging people. And then look at the size of the crater we just saw as well. What type of weapon would you use to make a hole in the ground that big, and everything that is thrown up causes utter devastation? It's utterly appalling.
And the front page of your paper, Andrew, the Daily Mail, depraved, that's from what Boris Johnson's, how he described it, wasn't it? And they also say that the Prime Minister is talking about holding Putin to account for his terrible crimes. Do you think that an atrocity like this could be some kind of turning point in how the NATO countries approach this conflict?
You'd like to. I don't think it is really, Anna, because what the Ukrainians want desperately, more than anything, is the no-fly zone to be enforced over Ukraine. And there's simply no wiggle room on that at all, no compromise. Britain's not up for it, nor is the United States, no NATO country is. We're even concerned about these soldiers who are deserting their ranks in Britain to go and fight in Ukraine, because we don't want to be seen to be British troops involved in a war with Russia. But when Boris Johnson said he's going to hold him to account, look, how do you hold Vladimir Putin to account? He doesn't care. He couldn't care less what people think about him. There is no statute of limitations on war crimes. So perhaps one day they will get him in a trial. But I hope long before that happens, somebody's taken him out with a bullet in his head, which is the very least he deserves. It is shocking. I think we're getting to the point now where nothing more that Putin can do could shock us, but he managed it today, didn't he? A maternity hospital, and Kevin's quite right. The scale of that crater in front of the hospital, what on earth were they thinking of? Why did they send a bomb that big to target a hospital? And I think he did it deliberately. I don't think it's an accident. I think it is designed to put the fear of God into those people in Mariupol. It's been bombarded now for days on days on days. The civil the process by which people were supposed to be able to be evacuated, the Russians have bombed them the whole way through it. They are going through a living hell in Mariupol, and it's beyond unspeakable.
And if we look at the front page of the Eye, Kevin, they have in one of their bullet points underneath the main headline, the Ukrainian president asking how much longer will the world be an accomplice ignoring terror. And in an interview with Sky News tonight, he said that millions of people could die if they don't close the skies. But do you agree that it is a very delicate decision, that the UK wants to support Ukraine as much as possible by sending weapons, but doesn't want to tip this into a wider war and escalate matters? Is that an understandable position?
It is, Anna, and Britain and Germany and the US and other countries that are sending weapons want to close the skies with the Ukrainians using ground-to-air missiles to bring down Russian aircraft and helicopters, doing it that way rather than flying in aircraft that would result inevitably in a military confrontation, which would escalate the conflict, and it would spread it and could lead to more dying, even if nuclear weapons aren't used. I understand Zelensky's anger and frustration, and sitting safely 1,500 miles away, I can appreciate it. He was rather tactful in his address to MPs and peers in Parliament, where he talked of the disappointment that the skies weren't being closed. But we saw the complications with the Poles wanting to send to Germany for the US to deliver Soviet-era MiG-29 aircraft rather than do it themselves, because they're very close to Russia, and they fear the consequences. So no, I understand. I'm on this. I'm with the generals rather than the armchair generals, who appreciate how it could spread very rapidly if all of a sudden you say, right, the RAF and others are going to enforce a no-fly zone. What happens when they're shot at from the ground or in the air? Then you have to engage, and missiles could be fired from Russia. So then do you go back into Russian territory, and it escalates? That's probably no comfort at all to the poor souls in Mariupol and other cities, but there's a kind of terrible, grim reality to it.
The front of the Daily Telegraph has the same picture, Andrew, that a lot of the papers have featured of that pregnant woman being carried out of the hospital. But their headline says Russia plotting chemical attack, quoting officials who are saying that they're concerned that Putin may be frustrated at his lack of progress so far in Ukraine and might resort to more extreme measures.
Yeah, and what they're doing, because we know Putin is a master of propaganda and black propaganda, and the state media in Russia is controlled by Putin. They keep running stories in Russia saying that Ukraine is planning chemical attacks on Russia. So that's why this terrible suspicion is now that that's what he's in fact planning to do to Ukraine. He will say it's self-defense. He's been provoked. They've done it in Syria. He uses whatever means possible to try to enforce his will. But we know the conventional warfare is not working for him. There were some very graphic images on Sky earlier tonight of that tank convoy that had been laid to waste by British missiles. And that great convoy that's trying to head for Kiev is still not any closer. So that's why increasingly he's having to resort to the tried and tested way of Putin: bombardment and horribly, potentially chemical warfare too, which would be another war crime. But still, I don't think it would change anything about the no-fly zone.
And a very quick word, Kevin, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the 11 o'clock hour, but very briefly, inside the Metro, of course, the humanitarian crisis continues. The headline in the Metro, we're giving up on Britain, say refugees. Yeah,
no, I think it's utterly shameless, the bureaucratic or callous inertia of the system, with fewer than 1,000 accepted into the UK out of 2 million refugees. No, families are giving up now at Calais, and Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has not covered herself in glorious criticism from Conservative MPs as well as Labour and the public.
OK, and we will explore that a little bit further at 11, and you are staying with us until about 11:45. So for the moment, both of you, thanks very much indeed, and we'll see you shortly.